To prove the result that is currently on your screen. This is one theorem on which basically gives you necessary and sufficient conditions for certain limits, for certain subsequences to exist that possess a certain limit. Okay, so let me parse the theorem statement with you. Given a sequence xn, the first part of the theorem says that there exists a subsequence of xn converging to some real number x if and only if the number of elements of the sequence which are within an epsilon distance of x is infinite for all positive epsilon. Okay, that makes sense that you could possibly have a subsequence converging to x, if and only if there are infinitely many. So you have to look at this set here. This set here corresponds to those indices, those positions of the sequence where the value taken by the sequence is within an epsilon distance of x. So when I say this set is infinite, essentially I'm saying that there are infinitely many elements of the sequence which are within an epsilon distance of x, right? And this must be true for every positive epsilon. There should be a sort of concentration. If I look at the values taken by the sequence, there should be a concentration around x, right? That is the necessary and sufficient condition for a subsequence to exist that converges to x. So that's your first statement. The second statement says that there exists a subsequence of x tending to plus infinity if and only if the sequence is unbounded from above. So also should seem fairly natural. At least one side should. And the third one is analogous, namely that there exists a subsequence of xn tending to minus infinity if and only if the sequence is unbounded from below. Okay, so this is the statement that we are going to prove in this video. But before we begin with the proof, there are a few remarks I'd like to make. First, in each of these cases, so there are three statements here, right? In each case, the implication in the forward direction is easy. Right? What does the forward direction implication mean? For example, in the first statement, it would say, if there exists a subsequence of xn converging to x, then the set of positions where the values of the sequence are within an epsilon distance from x must be infinite for all positive epsilon. This is fairly straightforward, right? The fact that that subsequence exists implies that the tail of that subsequence is going to be within an epsilon distance, and so clearly there will be infinitely many entries of the original sequence which are within an epsilon distance of x, right? So this is actually fairly straightforward. Similarly, the second statement, if there exists a subsequence of xn tending to infinity, then obviously the sequence is unbounded from above. Similarly, if there exists a subsequence of xn tending to minus infinity, well, the sequence is unbounded from below. Okay, so the forward implication in each of these cases is easy, and I'm not even going to address this in the proof. It's the reverse implication that is more interesting. So the thing to note is that in each case, proving the reverse implication boils down to constructing a suitable subsequence. With the stated limit behavior. Right? So for example, in the first case, if it is true that there are infinitely many elements of the sequence which are within an epsilon distance of x, then we have to show that one can construct a subsequence converging to x. Similarly, in the second case, if the sequence is unbounded from above, well, I have to construct a subsequence that tends to infinity. Similarly, if the sequence is unbounded from below, I have to construct a subsequence that tends to minus infinity. Okay, so the I would say the non-trivial part of this result in each of the three cases boils down to being able to demonstrate a subsequence of the given that the sequence satisfies certain properties, one has to demonstrate that one can construct a subsequence which has the claimed limit behavior, right? So that is really the crux of this proof. And the thing to note is that in each of these cases, as you will see in the proof, the subsequence can actually be constructed to also be monotone. Monotone. Okay, so that's the main thing here. So what we are going to do in the proof below is that we are going to prove this reverse implication in each of the three cases. In each of these cases, the proof will boil down to constructing a subsequence that has the claimed limit behavior. And in each case, well, not only will we be able to construct a subsequence that has that limit behavior, we will be able to construct a monotone subsequence that has that limit behavior. Okay, so that is really the statement of the theorem unpacked. So as I said, I'm only going to be focusing on the reverse implication. The forward implication in each case is trivial. Okay, let me start off with statement 1. Okay, which means the hypothesis here is this, that this set here is infinite for all positive epsilon. Now I have to prove that I can construct a subsequence converging to X. Okay, so let's first begin with the trivial case. So let's the trivial case here corresponds to there being infinitely many elements of the sequence that are exactly equal to X. Right? Now, if there are infinitely many elements of the sequence that are exactly equal to X, then it's obvious that a subsequence can be constructed, right? You can construct a subsequence that is just constant. You can construct a constant subsequence, which of course will converge to X. Right? So that's the trivial case to get rid of once and for all, that if the sequence is exactly X at infinitely many points, I can basically construct a subsequence that rides those points such that that subsequence is essentially just a constant, and so it trivially converges to X. Right? So with the trivial case out of the way, now we will focus on case B, which is the part where we assume that there's only, well, at most finitely many points at which the sequence is exactly equal to X. So that's case B. Case B is that the set of positions where the sequence is exactly equal to X is finite. Okay. Now remember, in the hypothesis that what that means is you still have infinitely many points within an epsilon distance. It's just that the set of points of the sequence where you are exactly equal to X is finite, right? What does this mean? That means that if I look at the set of points of the sequence where the distance between the elements of the sequence and X is strictly between 0 and epsilon, this set must have infinite cardinality for all epsilon greater than 0. Right? Clearly, because the set of elements which are within an epsilon distance is infinite, and the set of elements that are exactly equal to X is finite, and so therefore the set of elements whose distance from X is strictly between 0 and epsilon must also be infinite for all positive epsilon under case B. Okay, now the thing to note is that if you look at this set, right, this set itself can be written as a union of two sets. It's the set of all entries or positions of the sequence where xn minus x, is between 0 and epsilon, with the set of positions where x minus xn is between 0 and epsilon. Right? So the former set that I've written here is basically the set of positions where the elements of the sequence are strictly between x and x plus epsilon. Right? Whereas the second set is the set of positions where the elements of the sequence are strictly between x minus epsilon and x. Okay, so clearly the original set up here is in fact the union of these two. So if the original set has infinite cardinality, it obviously follows that at least one of the two sets in the union must have infinite cardinality. Agreed? So therefore, okay, my shall we say my big conclusion is the following. Under case B, at least one of the following is true. So let's call it B1, which is that the set of positions where xn minus x is between 0 and epsilon. This set is infinite for all epsilon greater than 0, or case B2 where the set of positions where x minus xn is between 0 and epsilon is infinite for all epsilon greater than 0. Okay, so there is a small leap I have made in making this claim. So you have to think about why this is true. Right? So earlier we said that for a given epsilon, either of this set or this set has infinite cardinality. Now from there I have made a small leap to argue that at least one of the following should be true. That either, well, that former set should have infinite cardinality for every epsilon positive, or the latter set should have infinite cardinality for every epsilon positive. Okay, so think that through a little bit. Yeah, with a moment of thought, you should be able to convince yourself that this is true. It boils down to looking at what happens to that set as epsilon shrinks. As epsilon shrinks, that set itself will shrink, right? So it couldn't possibly be that for one epsilon, maybe this set is infinite, but for a smaller epsilon, this set is no longer infinite and the other set becomes infinite and stuff like that. So that kind of business is not possible. One of these two has to be infinite for every positive epsilon. All right. So with this, now we will further restrict the proof to case 2b1, right? And case B2 can be handled on similar lines. So consider B1 and B2 can be handled on similar lines. Right, so that part I'm not going to do, but that you should be able to convince yourself that it works on similar lines. Okay, now we have to construct our subsequence. Okay, here is how we are going to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick n1 as follows. Pick n1 such that x n1 lies in the interval from x to x plus 1. Now why is this always doable? This is always doable because if I choose epsilon to be 1, clearly there are infinitely many elements of the sequence that are strictly under case B1, mind you, between x and x plus 1. So I pick one of them and I'm going to call that n1. Okay, so this can be done. Having picked nk, so I'm now going to pick the remaining elements of the sequence in an inductive fashion. So having chosen I'm going to choose nk plus 1 as follows. Such that the following condition is true. This is the main part of the construction that you have to understand. So I choose n1, my first position of the subsequence, such that it is within a distance of 1 from x. Okay. Now inductively, having chosen nk, I choose nk plus 1. Nk plus 1 of course has to be larger than nk by definition of a subsequence. But I choose it in such a way that xn plus 1 is greater than x. Okay, but less than the minimum of xnk. So which means I want xnk plus 1 to be less than xnk. Remember, xnk is also larger than x. Okay, so therefore this number is always larger than this number. So this is always possible. In addition, I also want to bound how far in absolute sense xnk plus 1 can be from x. I want it to be at most 1 by k distance away from x. Okay, so this construction is therefore, now why is this always possible? Because this number that I've written here is going to be strictly greater than x, right? So between x and any number strictly greater than x, there are infinitely many elements of the sequence. So I can always find one of them. That's exactly what case B1 tells you. And that one of them, I'm going to call it xn plus, I'm going to call it, one of those positions, I'm going to call it nk plus 1. Okay, so yeah, stare at this a little bit and convince yourself of two things. Two things are that if I now look at the subsequence x and k, this is a decreasing subsequence by construction. And another thing to note is that if you look at x and k, well, as k goes to infinity, it converges to x. So both of these things in fact follow from the construction. Right? Why is it a decreasing subsequence? Well, by construction, I've chosen, so x and k is always larger than x, and I always choose x and k plus 1 such that it is in fact between x and k. Okay, so it's always, it's a decreasing subsequence by design. Plus, I'm also shrinking the gap between the elements of the subsequent and x through this particular part of the construction. That gap is decaying at least as 1 by k, and that is what ensures that the subsequence in fact converges to x. Okay, so that essentially concludes our construction. So what we have shown is that under case B, where there are only finitely many elements that actually are equal to x, only two possibilities exist. For every epsilon, either there should be infinitely many elements of the sequence that are between x and x plus epsilon, or case B2, where for every epsilon, there are infinitely many elements of the sequence which are between x minus epsilon and 0. Now we have done B1. Whenever B1 holds, what we have shown is that I can construct a diminishing or decreasing subsequence of the sequence which converges to x. An analogous argument will tell you that under case B2, I can construct an increasing subsequence of the sequence that converges to x. Okay, so that really completes part 1 of the theorem, where we had to show that if that condition on infinitely many elements of the sequence lying within an epsilon distance of x for every positive epsilon, if that condition holds, I can construct always a subsequence that converges to x. Okay. Next we move on to part 2 of the theorem. In part 2, we have to prove that if the sequence is unbounded from above, I can construct a subsequence that tends to infinity. Okay. So again, as I said, in the proof we are working on only the reverse implication, so it boils down to the construction of that subsequence. So again, it turns out it's actually fairly straightforward. I can take n1 to be just 1 in this case, and then inductively pick nk plus 1 such that the following is true. right? So I can choose n1 to be 1. Now this nk plus 1 is obviously going to be greater than nk, okay, by construction. That's obvious, okay. So for any k greater than equal to 1, having picked nk, I'm going to pick nk plus 1 such that x nk plus 1 should be on one hand larger than x nk. So I want to make this an increasing subsequence, and I also want it to be larger than k, right? And why is this always possible? Well, this is some real number, right? And so in the tail of the sequence, because of the sequence is unbounded from above, to the right of nk, there has to be at least one element of the sequence that actually exceeds this. Well, choose one of those elements, the position of that to be nk plus 1. That's all there is to the construction, right? So what we have shown is that if the sequence is unbounded from above, I can construct an increasing subsequence of the sequence that tends to infinity, right? And the third part is actually easy. I mean, if you have understood the B part, then the C part is straightforward. Namely, that if the sequence is unbounded from below, then I can construct, in fact, a decreasing subsequence of the sequence that tends to minus infinity. A very similar construction to that of part 2 will in fact hold. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this result. We will continue, in fact, we'll have more things to say about subsequences, but we'll do that in the next video.